السلام عليكم. أهلا وسهلا. يعطيكم العافية in the third lecture of the full stack bootcamp. Before we get started, let's review شنو اللي تعلمناه أول يومين. تعلمنا variables وتعلمنا conditions. Variables اللي هي كانت عبارة عن boxes we store the information inside them عشان نقدر نتذكرهم like later on. أما conditions, why do we use conditions? حالات معينة. cases, okay. شنو ممكن نستفيد من conditions? You have a calculator. I have two situations. I have two branches. أنا عندي one statement and I have two conditions for that statement. يا أنا أروح يمين يا أنا أروح يسار, which is basically what we call branching. And I have a condition and it's either true, so I go to that direction, or it's either false, so I go to the other direction. So those are the two main things اللي أول شيء تعلمناهم. وبعدين عندنا the third important concept in programming, which is called functions. في أحد يذكر كلمة functions من قبل؟ سامعينها بالجامعة maybe؟ بالثانوية؟ دوال؟ Do you remember that? Yeah? Right? What's functions? Do you remember what's functions?
Like it's an action being done.
It's an action being done and performed.
Yeah.
Okay? That's perfect. بعد بالرياضيات, why did we use functions? تذكرون fx equals x square? الذكريات المزينة. Yeah? So functions is مثل ما قال حيدر, it's set of actions اللي I can perform or I can invoke to execute. So let's take a look at the slides الحين and then we can get started and code معاكم. So functions basically المصطلح العام theoretically in JavaScript is similar to a procedure, a set of statements that performs a task or calculates a value. But for a procedure to qualify as a function, it should take some input and return and output, where there is some obvious relationship between the input and the output. نفس ما كنا بالرياضيات مثلا كنا نقول for example fx equals x square. صح? So this is the function definition. I define a function that's going to take some input, which is x. I don't know what's x. I don't care what's x. But it takes x. And then the return value of that function is going to return x squared. Then I can take that function definition and apply on it any number. For example, 3. So now if I plug in 3 as a parameter of that function, what's going to be the result? I'm going to substitute 3 مكان x, and that's going to be 3 to the power of 2, which is what? Which is 9. So we saw that there is a direct relationship between input and output for that function. So the function is the procedure. وهذا الشيء it's very very important بعالم الكمبيوتر, لأن الكمبيوتر what's special about it? What's special about computers? Why did they make computers? يريح الإنسان؟ يشتغل أسرع. ليش؟ يعني شنو أكثر شيء يميز الكمبيوتر عن العقل البشري؟ Multitask, okay. But the first thing they use computer for is what? Memory, exactly. They created computers so they can store value. And the first thing we talked about من قبل بالvariables, in the variable stores values under specific names. So the computer is able to store values, right? And we can retrieve those values, نفس ما تكلمنا من قبل بالvariables, we can retrieve them at any time by just calling them. So I define let x equals 5, and then I call x. X remembers and it was 5, right? So the computer is amazing at storing information. But sometimes we don't want just to store a value. We want to store a set of procedures, which is again قدرة الكمبيوter, and it can remember things. It can remember values and it can remember set of instructions. And that's the second thing that the computer خلينا نقول it stores. The first thing, it stores value, and that's variables. And the second thing, the computer can store set of procedures. And again, why variables? تكلمنا عنها المرة اللي طافت, because they can do a level of abstraction. If I want to create مثلا I want to calculate a surface of a circle. What's the equation? You know it, صح? 2 pi r ولا pi r square? Which one? المحيط 2 pi r Okay, so عشان أنا ألاقي الباي كل مرة do I have to write 3.1457 وإلى آخره. No, what do? I store it in a constant and then I just use that constant at any time. And this creates a level of abstraction, which means I don't have to remember what's pi every time. I don't have to write a 3.14. The same thing for functions. I don't have to remember a set of procedures to calculate a very complex equation. I can just store it and then retrieve it, which gives me a level of abstraction. So why variables? To store values under specific names, to retrieve those values whenever they get called, and to create a level of abstraction, as we just said. Why functions? They can store operations under specific names. نفس F, نفس G, نفس make me a sandwich. I can store set of procedures. And it can compute values whenever it gets invoked. Okay, and when you say invoked, معناته إن أنا قاعد أشغل this function. I'm pressing the play button. And again, it creates a level of abstraction. I don't have to remember the number of steps I need to do to perform a certain action. I can just do it once, define it once, and then I just call it. Okay? It's exactly like a juicer machine. How is that related to functions? لأن I don't have to think what's the procedure اللي راح يدش التفاحة تدش and then تنخلط whatever اللي يصير لها and then it gives me a juice. I just deal with it abstractly. Give me the fruits, I give you the juice. I don't have to worry how things got created. I don't have to create the juicer machine every time I want to make a juice. I create the machine once and then I use it every time I want to get the output. Okay? Is that clear? Makes sense? شنو functions? Variables, we store values. Functions, we store procedures. So before we see functions and actions, let's take this example. The bedtime routine is أول شيء we brush our teeth, we wear our PJs, and we read a bedtime story, and we tuck in the brush, we switch off the lights, نقول دعاء النوم, and we sleep. So imagine that if you want to tell your kid to sleep, you have to say all of those instructions every time they have to sleep. That's going to be hectic. Sometimes we're going to miss one. صح? But what if I teach them that when we say go to bed, these are the set of instructions that you have to do. فالياهل ما راح يفهمني خلاص go to bed معناتها they literally go to bed. No, they know that go to bed means a set of instructions and procedures they have to do in order for them to go to bed. Okay? So let's see how we can create functions in action with JavaScript. نفس ما تعلمنا for the first lectures, we use the terminal because we're super fancy coders. Yeah? We don't want to use الطريقة التقليدية. So let's go to our development folder. Did everyone create their development folder in terminal? Yeah. Yes? I assume no one is writing anything in desktop. Yeah? Please. خاصة اللي عندهم Mac and that connects to iCloud and that messes things around. Please don't use desktop. So let's go to development folder. Let's make a new direction and call this day 3-functions. And cd to it. And let's create our files. How do we create our files? شنو command? A file? File. How do we create a file? Touch, exactly. So touch, functions. سلوى نسيت. It's okay. It's okay. Touch functions, and then how do we open Visual Studio Code? لا ما نبي نعاد. That's super fancy. Code dot أحسنتي يا سلوى. Perfect. Okay. Let's see why Visual Studio Code is not installed. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Trust this author. I do trust the author. تشوفون الشاشة عدل? Okay. So how do we create functions? الفاريبلز قلنا احنا نكتب let x equals 100 and constant قلنا const a equals pi equals 3.14. But how do we create functions? Guess. Functions. Active function? Yeah. Function is actually a keyword. So to define a function, as simple as that, you just write function. And then مثل ما كنا قبل, we define the name of that variable or constant by just writing its name. It's exactly the same. So let's write a function which is called go to bed. As simple as that, okay? The most important thing that makes function different than a variable is this step, which is adding those two parentheses. When I add those two parentheses, that means that this is a function. Okay? We'll leave them empty now because this function will not take any parameters. What's a parameter? We're going to talk about it in detail that way. And after that, we define the scope of that function, which means now you write the set of procedures where I'm going to start with it لين ما أوصل حق الend. The set of procedures. So what's the first step? So I can't say equal, okay? Because equal was used for the variable because I have a box and I want to put a value inside that box. But now I'm defining a function that I'm going to set a set of procedures. So to open a scope we use شنو تتوقعون؟ كيرلي براكت أحسن. شكلك تعرف برمجة من قبل. Yeah? Perfect, yeah, ماجد. So we open curly bracket and now we open the scope of the function, or sometimes we call it the body of the function. So anything that goes here is considered the function definition, and each line is considered one step that the function has to do. So you have to write actually a valid JavaScript code here. So let's just write whatever is there. So console.log إذا تذكرونها to log something in the screen, and we write شنو أول شيء نسويه when we go to bed? Brush teeth and shift option وتحت عشان I copy the line. We talked about this hack 2 days ago. And then بعد brushing teeth شنو راح نقول? What do we do? Wear PJs. And finally, let's say tuck in. وآخر شيء start snoring. Zzz. Okay. لازم واحدة capital وواحدة small. Okay. So now I created the function. Let's run the program. And I'm gonna go to the terminal and write شلون نشغل الفانكشن أو شلون نشغل الكود؟ أحد يعرف؟ ممتاز. نود شنو؟ functions.js. ما صار شيء. ليش ما اشتغل؟ جاوبيني سلوى ليش ما اشتغل؟ يس. سلام ممتاز حيدر. So حيدر he might شو اسمه شايف شيء من قبل أكيد right? He saw some videos. Okay, perfect. So now we created the function, and this is the most thing that خلينا نقول واحد تو داش بالبرمجة يغلط فيه إن they think they have to define the functions multiple times. But once you define the function, that doesn't mean you called it. Which means when we created this juicer machine, it doesn't mean we made a juice. This is exactly what happened. I made the function. I defined the function, and I defined how to go to bed. But I didn't go to bed. Why? Because I didn't press the play button that asked me to go to bed. So the first step of dealing with functions is defining the function. You have to define the function, create the machine, and now the function is ready to be executed. And then you can execute it at a bazillion time, infinite. Okay? So this is called function. Oops, I'm sorry, let me add a comment here. Function definition. Okay? معناتها it did not get called. No one called it. معناتها it's not going to be executed. And then we call the function, go to bed. And how do we call the function? If I just say that, and I do node, nothing happens as well. ليش ما سوينا لها console log نفس variables? That's a very beautiful question. Because if I try to do console.log, go to bed, just like that, and I try to call the function, it's going to tell me that this is a function that's called go to bed. Doing console log for a function is like telling your child how to go to bed. They're not going to go to bed. They're going to tell you that you told me go to bed is 1 2 3. So you can't just console log the function. You want to invoke the function, to press the play button. And here, where we use the go to bed and the parentheses. نفتح قوس ونسكر قوس, and that means we are invoking the function. We are pressing the button of that function to start executing. So let's clear. Ta-da! اعطونا صفقة يستاهل صفقة الفانكشن. Amazing. So now we know how to create function definition. Okay? We created the function definition and then the next step which is شنو سميناها هذه؟ function calling أو invoking. Yes, سلوى. That's a very interesting question and ممكن وايد ناس تغلط فيه. So let's take this line. boom 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 ونروح هني. If I call this is gonna work as well. Okay? بس راح أكون حريصة شوية زيادة لأن this works in this scope. But other places, like if you go to React and you define a class, for example, maybe, or you define a function inside a function, this is not going to work. Because the global space اللي هني, everything gets read أول شيء, بعدين we start invoking. But that's a nice question. But maybe if you want to discuss more details on how did that work, we can discuss it later. But it's always preferred to have the function calls يكونون تحت, والfunctions definitions يكونون فوق. Okay? ليش؟ لأن I want to see what do I have. Okay? You don't want to just call something بعدين تستوعب إن definition ماله تحت. No, let's get to know our program. What functions are created? What are the machines that I have so I can invoke them or I can use them. Okay? So that's the first function that we created. Any questions? Thumbs up? All good? Okay. Now the second concept about functions, which is why functions are created and how they can be abstract, is when I take parameters. What's a parameter? في أحد يقدر يقول لي شنو parameters بالعربي؟ فضحت نفسي أنا, بس في حد مر عليه كلمة parameters؟ شنو parameters بالعربي؟ Just to translate it. المتغير is variables. Parameters معاملات. Okay, فلما أنا I create something وأنا أحط له معامل أو خلينا نقول it's actually parameter. Let's just talk English. معاملات هذه قبل كنا ندرسها بالثانوي. So when I have a parameter for a function, that means that this function is now dynamic. يعني it doesn't do the same thing every single time. Now if I call this go to bed again, I'm gonna call it قبلها I'm gonna say console log I أو خلي أحط dash 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 dash. It's just, let's not overcomplicate things. And I'll clear this. Look at this. So it called the functions the first time, which is basically I'm doing the go to bed procedure, and then dash dash dash, and then it's the same exact procedure. This function now is static. It doesn't change. Okay? But what's cool about function is it's able to give you multiple different results based on different actions. And that's what we can do with parameters. All right? So the main example here اللي احنا عندنا اياه, which is basically a mathematical function. We can create, هني خلينا نكتب parameters, a function that calculates our age. Okay? So let's create that function. Function. What's, oops, I can't do that. Can I do this? Can I do this? Okay, فضحت نفسي أنا. We can't do that لأن in programming the only symbol we can use in names is this symbol. Okay, we agreed on this. نفس variables exactly. The same variable naming convention exactly. So what's my name? طبعا we يعني recall أن if we have multiple words in a single variable name, we add the upper camel case convention. يعني يفصل كل كلمة ثانية uppercase letter. So it's not what's my name, what's my age. So what's my age? And I'm just gonna أحسب console log كم السنة اليوم؟ 2022 صح؟ ناقص an age a birth year, right? هذه المعادلة اللي احنا عارفينها. So what's your birth year? 1998. Okay. Now if I call this function what's my age and I try to call it راح يطلع لي 24. Now if I want to call it I have to create what's عمر's age as well أو what's سلوى's age. سلوى أي مواليد؟ كذي؟ 1995. So now I have two functions, what's my age and what's Selwa's age. Do you think this makes sense? صح؟ مو معقول. For every single person I have to create a function for them. That's not acceptable. بس عندنا one parameter that's different. شو البارامتر اللي تغير from this function to this function? This one, صح? So how about we have it as a parameter, a variable we pass to the function so it can calculate based on it. So I can have مثلا birth year here instead. صح؟ بس شلون اقدر استقبل birth year؟
لازم نحطه اتوقع بين القوسين.
احسنت. نحطه بين القوسين هني and now we have introduced to that function a parameter that it can accept and then it will use inside that function call only. ليش قلت only؟ الحين راح نشوف. So إذا أنا سويت كذي what's my age what's Selwa's age and I try to run this program خلوني أشيل هذا عشان لا نتعقد منه. Let's comment it out and let's see how this program is going to be executed. So طلع لي 24 and 9. ليش طلع لي 24؟ خلينا نشوف. What's my age is 2022 ناقص 1998 which is اللي سولفنا عنها اللي قلنا إن إحنا ما نحبها. صح؟ Let me just take this ونشيلها ونحطها مكان هذه. So what's my age now is redefined to be this one. So what's my age? هو راح ياخذ I'm sorry. Let me just add this again. Birth year and then it console-logs 2022 ناقص birth year. So now there is no Selwa's age. It's only what's my age. Let me run it again. Now my age is 9. Why? Because when I define this function, I ask this function to accept a parameter, which is birth year. When I call that function, سحبت على البارامتر وكملت. بس هني يقول definition, I need you to pass me a birth year so I can console log you your age. But I called the function, I invoked it, and I never passed anything. So how do you think we'll pass anything? It's convenient, صح؟ واضح. We add it between the parameters. البارنثيسز هذيل. So I'll add 1995. So I'll run it again with 1996, and let's check this out. Now it gave me 27 and 26. And that's what's cool about تبي نصفقين الموضوع؟ Let's do it. One function gave me two different results, but for the exact same action, which is give me a birth year, I'll give you your age. It's consistent. It's not different. We can have multiple parameters as well. We can add birth year, and I can add a name. So in order to add another parameter, نفصلها بشنو؟ comma. So now if I call this وأقول له console log 2022 ناقص birth year and أحط فاصلة وأقول is your age بعدين أقول له فاصلة name, this is going to say 2022 ناقص your birth year, which is calculating your age, is your age عمر. So now if I want to call this function without passing the second parameter, it's going to say 27 is your age undefined because I didn't pass a name. So let's pass this one. So I'm going to pass هني Selwa as a string, and here I'm going to pass منو عمر. So let's check this out. 27 is your age Selwa and 26 is your age عمر. Yes. تبين تستعملين birth year هني؟ Oh, that's a very beautiful question. So Modi is saying, what if I define birth year هني? And I have it as 2022, someone who got born in 2022. Do you think this is going to give me 0? من يقول راح يعطيني 0؟ ما حد؟ لأن birth year it's defined, and now I'm going to subtract 2022 من 2022. birth year. شلون؟ راح ياخذ الكول. Okay. Let's see. So كلكم متفقين راح ياخذ اللي أنا I defined it in the function? Yes. It didn't. Yeah. Perfect. It didn't go to 0. ليش؟ لأنه when I define a function, it takes the parameter الأقرب لها. So this one is defined inside the function. It's closer to this procedure than this one. And we're going to talk about scoping and closures in a later time. بس يعني this is called خلينا نقول closures، إنه في أنا عندي شيء برا وعندي شيء داخل. maybe I create a function في variable فوق وفي variable تحت. which one do we read؟ بس يعني you know the idea of that. Yes.
Does the order of the parameters when we call it, does that matter?
Amazing question. What did he say? He said with the parameters اللي موجودين هني الأوردر مالهم matter. Let's try it. So I'm gonna add name أول شيء and then I'm gonna change it with birth year. You know what? Let's keep it هني and I'll just change this one. So Selwa I'm gonna keep it and Umar I'm gonna have Umar أول شيء and then I'm gonna have 1996. شو تتوقعون يصير؟ المفروض يفهم صح؟ هو ذكي يعني كذي على طول يلقطها وهو طايره. Nan is your age 1996. So كمبيوتر للأسف ما يلقطها وهي على الطاير لأن you defined a function to take two parameters and order matters. Yes, beautiful question. صراحة أحيي. Good question. Beautiful question. Order does matter in function creation because if you pass a parameter أول واحد راح يقول أوكي هذا أول parameter خليني أروح حق الفانكشن and I'll pass it there. خلينا ناخذ هذا الإكزامبل اللي إحنا مثلا عندنا ماكينة عصير. حلو؟ هذه ماكينة عصير، تخيلوها إن هي ماكينة عصير أو ماكينة قهوة. إنه كلكم عشاق القهوة الحين أنت أوكي؟ سو هني أنتم تحطون الكوفي وهني تحطون شنو؟ الملك. أوكي؟ واخر شيء تطلع لكم كوب القهوه اللي هني النهائي. So what's going to happen اذا حطيتوا الكبسوله داخل المكان مال الحليب والحليب داخل مكان مال الكبسوله؟ هذا ايش راح يصير؟ راح يتلخبط صح؟ راح يحاول يعصر الكبسوله بالحليب ويطلع بخار ودخان وتحترق الماكينه. So yes, order does matter. لان اذا انا هني I pass the first parameter مكان هذا انا قاعد اعفس الدنيا. هذا راح ياخذه and it's gonna pipe it into somewhere that's gonna do an operation and هذا راح ياخذه and pipe it into somewhere that's gonna do a certain operation. So yes, order does matter. Okay? The last thing about function is returning. احنا الحين those functions they take parameters and they execute something but they don't give you back anything. What do I mean by give you back anything? Functions are four types. A function that doesn't take anything and doesn't return anything, a function that takes parameters but doesn't return anything, a function that doesn't take parameters and returns something, and a function that takes parameters and returns something. So we have two things. يا ياخذ parameter يا ياخذ parameter يا يرجع value يا ما يرجع value. Okay? What's a function that we don't need to take anything and return anything? Imagine your dad told you to go to the supermarket and get something for yourself. Okay? So he just commanded something. Go to the supermarket. He didn't give you any money and he's not expecting you to get something for him, to take it from you. Okay? So that's a function that doesn't give you any parameter and doesn't require you to return anything. So how do we define that? So a function, foo for example, that's it. Just foo and any procedure inside. That's all. But the second type is your dad is going to give you money to buy you something. So you don't have to go back home with something. Okay? So he's going to give you function foo and he's going to give you some money, but he's not requiring you to do anything with that. عادي إذا تبي تروح الجمعية تشتري آرو حقك it's okay. You know, يعني كنت أروح الجمعية just to get آرو and بيبسي وأرجع. For some reason يعني that was my combination. So ما يصير نسمي two functions with the same name. And ممكن أبوكم يعطيكم فلوس ما يعطيكم فلوس بس he asks you to give him milk for example أو بطاط. Okay? So he wants to get potato out of your خلينا نقول journey to the supermarket. Okay? فهني لازم نسوي شيء. We have to return to our dad something. وآخر شيء he gives you money and he wants you to get back with the potato. Okay? فبس هما يعني they're not four types as much as four use cases for the functions. Okay? We can use them with no parameters, we can use them with parameters, and we can have no return or with return. So what do I mean by return? So if I have this coffee machine but I don't have a place to get a coffee, how can I get a coffee? اذا ما كان في عندي مكان يطلع لي الكوب where can I get the coffee
Use your hands.
I use my hand or the تخيلوا ان coffee machine that just screams I made you a coffee بس خلاص انتوا تحطون input تحطون الكبسولة وتحطون حليب and the machine it just says literally I made you a coffee بس you didn't get a coffee ما استفدنا شيء صح؟ So you need an output for that. So that's where we actually return a value. So let's create a function that actually does return a value which is مثلا f and it takes x. So how do we return a value? شو تتوقعون؟ Return. As simple as that. And I'll return x times مثلا 10. Okay? Now if I call this function f and I add مثلا 10 to it, okay? What's going to happen? طبع لي 27 والنان هذا مال الفانكشن كولز اللي فوق بس ما طلع شيء. فهني I didn't console log. هني I'm returning. Okay? So this function is going to give you back a value. So how to get that value? Imagine that you work with a juicer machine or a coffee machine and تحطون التفاح بس تشغلون ماكينة بس مو حاطين جلاس. شو راح يصير؟ راح يكبره صح؟ ما استفدنا منه شيء. بس أنا أحتاج أحط جلاس عشان آخذ العصير and then I present it to the world. Right? So this function, when I call it here, it's giving me back a value. So let's take it. How do I take it? I just create a constant and I say method value is f10. Omar, variable equals function? No, 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 no. This is a function call. The function returns a value. So I take the value that the function returns. Is that clear? Yeah? Okay. I know this might sound confusing for the first time, but a function that returns is going to give you back a value. It's like a machine. I'm putting tufah, khadar, whatever, and then I play the button, the function executes and returns. But if I don't capture back that value, it's gone. So we can capture it by creating a constant, or we can immediately console log it. So I can say console log, هذا ما في shortcut, console log, and I call f to 10. So lots of parentheses now, but شنو اللي يصير? This one is going to return back a value of 10 plugged inside x and then multiplied by 10. So this is going to be شنو؟ شنو أنا قاعد أقول console log 100. But this function call is going to give me back that value. Does that make sense, Muli? Okay, so let's save and let me just comment these out. And boom, 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 it's 100. Now if I call console log f of 5, شنو راح يصير عندي؟ 50. So cool. I can create multiple values as well. One of the coolest examples I like is BMI. شنو BMI؟ تعرفون BMI؟
Like the weight and the height.
Exactly. لما الواحد يحس نفسه شوية قام يكرش يروح حق أخصائي تغذية يقول له يا ابن الحلال شوف لي وضعي أبي أعرف am I okay ولا not؟ ف they do the first thing BMI test. يحطون على الميزان يقيسون طوله. Two things. طول ووزن. And we get a value. By that value I decide whether or not the person is خلينا نقول overweighted, underweighted وإلى آخره. So we can create that function. So calculate, or let's say get BMI. وعادة the functions we always try to name them with an action. So get BMI, calculate BMI. تلاحظون إن دائما يكون في فعل. Okay? We don't use nouns for them. عادة. So get BMI and we pass a weight and we pass a height. Those are the two parameters that getting BMI, the BMI function needs to get the BMI. And we return immediately. شنو ال BMI equation? So what's BMI equation? في أحد يعرفها؟ So BMI is weight in kilograms تقسيم height in meters. Okay? So أنا راح أقول له هني make sure you pass weight in kg and height in meter. So I return weight تقسيم شنو؟ height square. Can I say this? ليش ما نقول؟ خلينا نجرب. بين قوسين؟ Maybe. Let's try. أو خلينا بالأحوط. Okay. نسوي height. So let's console log this function. Console log get BMI And then if I open the parentheses, it's going to require me to pass أول شيء weight and then height, which is order matters. So the weight for خلينا نقول a thin person is going to be 70 and his height is going to be تقريبا 1.9. So 190 centimeters, 70 kilograms. It's kind of خلينا نقول هذا الشخص وايد ضعيف. So 1.9. And let's calculate that. شنو اللي قاعد يطلع لي هني؟ اوكي قاعد يطلع لي 70 which is not a realistic number لانه المفروض انه يطلع لي تقريبا around من 15 الى 25. So نفس ما قال حسين, what if we put them those in اقواس and now I can calculate any person's BMI. اقدر اقول calculate BMI حق واحد وزنه 70 واحد وزنه 80 and his height is 1.8 and I get two different results. Okay. So that's how we create functions. There are two main steps for creating functions, or to dealing with functions. The first step is defining the function, which is setting the procedures. And the second step is invoking that function. And there are 4 use cases for that function. The most use case اللي راح تمر علينا is giving it an input and requiring it to give us an output. The exercise اللي راح نشتغل عليه اليوم is pretty interesting because you're going to be able to build a calculator. So لا تخافون, you don't get intimidated because the code is already there. You just have to fill the places اللي تحتاجون تكتبون فيها functions. So let's look at the code together. So the code has a function called button click and it has the function called print console. You're going to be using functions طول الexercise مالكم. And راح تستعملون button click لما I click on a button and it gives you شنو البutton اللي انتو you clicked on. Let's download it really quick عشان تعرفون what's يعني exactly we should do with this exercise. So you can actually open something by just dragging it into VS Code. Okay. And you have to do live server. ليش live server مو موجود؟ Okay. أتوقع لأن I just signed into another account, so you have to install live server extension. منزلين المرة اللي طافت يا جماعة ولا لا؟ منزلينه كلكم؟ Okay, perfect. So after you install it, خلينا نخلص من installing. للحين ما نزل.
You have to restart it.
You
have to restart VS Code. After done. Support code.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Let's see. Live server. Open with live server. It worked. Okay. So here is the calculator app. The UI is ready for you. And you have to do the calculation by yourself, which is إن إذا أنا طقيت على واحد, الواحد has to go here. So how do we do that? The code is already there. There is a index.js, that's your file that you're going to be working on. And whenever you click a button, it's going to console log that button. So let's open the console اللي موجود داخل البراوزر. I don't know why I'm using Safari. أكون معكم صريح. So let's go to Chrome. So if I open the console, okay, and I click on any button, look at this, clicking 1, clicking 2, clicking 9, clicking plus. So everything is going to be clear. Okay, when you click the button, this function is going to be invoked. So you write whatever you want here. And there is a nice function here, it's called print on console, which is going to print anything you give it. So if I want to print my name, Umar is cool, it's going to print my name. Okay? So you can use that wisely. شلون؟ إنكم تستعملون print on console مو هني. Print on console بالبداية it has to be شنو أول شيء يطلع بالcalculator with your phone? 0. The first state is 0, right? And instead of console logging, I can just print on console شنو? The text that I'm getting. So now if I press 1, it's going to print 1. But if I press 5, it's going to print 5. So now you're going to use your smarter brains to know how to concatenate those two things. أحط 1 قدام 5 if I click 1, 5. And then if I click plus, it doesn't print plus. It holds it. And then if I click another thing, it's going to erase اللي كان موجود and starts adding. So this is a very, very interesting exercise. You have the rest of the class to do it. The TAs are going to be passing by you after 30 minutes to make sure that you guys are on the safe track. Any question on this? تبون نسوي another trick هني قبل لا أعطيكم hint؟ Yeah؟ تبون hint؟ تبون تحلهم براكم؟ Okay. The instructions are all written in in warehouse and in GitHub as well. راح تشوفون إنه you have two parts. The first part is displaying numbers. So if I write 1, 5 and then AC, it's gonna clear that out. The second part is actually operation. Okay? So the first part تخلصونه تدشون على operation. Don't do operation unless you're done with the first part. And the third part is history. Okay? History, we're not gonna touch it today. We're gonna touch it when we learn arrays. So you're gonna continue working on this project for 3 days. Okay? So today you're just going to be required to do part 1, and إذا ما خلصتوا part 2 you're gonna have time for tomorrow to continue on part 2. Alright, يعطيكم العافية و good luck.